Let's make fun and practical lavender bags. They're perfect to use up your scrap fabrics and they're perfect to give away as gifts. Let me show you how. So to make our little pinwheel, I'm going to take 2 pieces of fabric that both measure 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches square. I'm going to place them right sides together, line up all the edges, and then I will just pop some pins in so it stays in place. Now we're going to sew around the edge, so I'm going to put my pins in the center like this so they don't get in the way. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. So I've got a 1/4 inch foot on to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm stitching at stitch length 2. We want a really nice compact stitch so our lavender doesn't fall out, and I'm using wonderful confetti thread. I'm going to start on the very edge and sew right along to the bottom edge. I'm going to come right off the edge, pull it around and then turn it and then start on the next edge, and we'll do this for all 4 sides. Okay, so I've sewn along all 4 edges. I'm going to just remove my pins, and now let's cut. Now what we're going to do is cut it diagonally from corner to corner on both sides. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up where the stitches intersect at the top and at the bottom, and then cut. And then I'm just going to turn it and do the same on this side. It's moved slightly, so I'm just going to fix it. Now we have our 4 half square triangles. Let's press. So I'm just going to press the stitches and then open it up and press towards our dark fabric. I'm going to finger press so we don't have any creases in there, and then press, and I'll repeat that for all 4 half square triangles. Now for all the half square triangles, I'm just going to trim them down so they measure 2.5 inches square. So I'm just going to find the diagonal line on my ruler, place it on top of the seams, find my 2.5 inch mark, and then trim. And because I don't have it exactly a 2.5 inch ruler, I do just have to turn it once I've done the 2 sides. Find that diagonal line again, find my 2.5 inch marking, and then cut on the remaining 2 sides. Okay, and then I'll repeat that for all 4 half square triangles. So then take all our half square triangles and place them so that they create our pinwheel. Okay, just like that, and you can just double check that it is creating the pinwheel. Then all we're going to do is take take the first row and sew those 2 pieces together, take the second row and sew those pieces together, and then we'll sew each of the rows together. So I'll do that now. So I'm just going to give it a quick press. I'm going to press that last seam open, and you can press it to the side if you want. It doesn't really matter. It's a little bit fiddly. And if you wanted to, you could have pressed the rows when we sewed them together. I didn't worry too much because this is more of a craft project than going to be a pinwheel that we use on a quilt. I'll just give that a press on the top too. Let's move on to the next step. So now we've got our finished pinwheel, a piece for the backing that measures 4.5 inches squared, and a piece of ribbon that measures 8 inches. The ribbon is optional, and that's just if you'd like to hang your little lavender bag on, let's say, a coat hanger or what have you. So I'm just going to take my ribbon and fold it in half. My ribbon has a wrong side, so I'm going to face it wrong sides together. Sorry, I'm a bit tongue twisted. Line up these edges here, and then I want to place it right on my point there. I just want to check that it's going to be coming past the back there. That looks pretty good. And we can line it up with that seam to make sure it's nice and centered. and that looks pretty good to me. And then what I'm going to do is take my backing and place that on top. And then I'm just going to really carefully, and we've placed the backing right sides together, I'm just going to place a pin right through that ribbon, holding everything in place there. So all my edges are lined up. I've got the pin holding the ribbon, and then I will just pop a few more pins in to keep it in place. We're going to sew right around the edge again, so I'm popping my pins in like this. And then what we need to do is leave an opening. So you can just remember to leave an opening, or if you'll forget, we could just mark one. So I'll just mark one on the side here. It's probably about 3 inches. We just need it big enough to be able to turn it right sides out. So what I'm going to do is start at this mark, sew all the way around, and then finish at this second mark. I'm actually going to sew in the opposite direction that I just said. Sorry if that's a bit confusing. I'm starting right on that mark that I did, and I'm going to go forward a few stitches and then go back a few stitches, and then I'm just going to go all the way around. When I come up to my corners, I'm going to do my best guess of a 1/4 inch seam allowance, make sure my needle's down, lift my foot up and turn. And if I've gone a little bit too far like that, I can just swing it back around and do one more stitch and try again. Okay, that looks better. I'll just carry on until I've come back to that second marking. Okay, now we're going to remove our pins and move on to the next step. So I'm just going to trim all the corners, getting close to the stitches but making sure I don't cut the stitches, just to remove the bulk. And I'm not going to cut the side where we have the ribbon. I'm not going to worry about that because we don't want it to pull through. So once I'm happy, I'm going to turn it right sides out. So I'm going to find my opening, pop my fingers in and grab a corner and pull it through. And then we want it to sit really nicely. So at this point we can get a point turner. And if you don't have a point turner, you could use something like a chopstick. I do recommend point turners because they're just such a wonderful tool and you'll use it so much, and it really helps get everything sitting really nicely. So we can not only fix our corners there, our points, but we can also run it along the seams to make sure it's all sitting really nicely. And then when I'm happy, I will just give that a quick press. So I'm just going to find my opening and make sure that's pressed nicely so it looks like the opening was never there. We just want to fold those edges in about 1/4 inch because that was our seam allowance. And then when I'm happy, I'll give that a press. And then I'll give the whole thing a press. And also flip it over to the other side. Okay, let's fill our little bag with lavender. So I've got dried lavender here, which you can find really inexpensively on somewhere like Amazon. Do make sure it's dried because if it's fresh, it might go a bit moldy. So make sure it's dried, and then we're just going to pop some in our little opening there. Okay, this is going to be a little bit messy. Maybe I could have left the opening a little bigger to make this part a bit easier. Now, we don't need it to be completely packed, and you can't smell it, but it does smell absolutely beautiful. And once it loses its scent, you can always just drop a few essential oil drops on there, lavender oil drops. Okay, I might just put a little bit more in. So it doesn't have to be completely packed. Okay, I think that's about right. So now what we're going to do is sew this opening closed. Well, first of all, I'm going to clean up all this lavender, and then let's sew our openings closed. So I'm just going to sew with about a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to close up that opening. Now I'm going to go forward a few stitches and then do a back stitch. And if you'd prefer, you could actually do this by hand if you wanted it to be a little bit less obvious. But I think it's going to be fine. And if you wanted to, you could actually sew around the whole edge. You might need to just like maneuver the lavender out a bit so it doesn't get into those seams. But I'm just going to I'm just going to sew my opening closed and leave it at that. I'll just trim that loose thread there. You can hardly even notice that opening. So there we have our finished lavender bag. Isn't that just darling? Now you can see it's not completely full at all, but it definitely does have quite a substantial amount of lavender in there. Now I've done the pinwheel on the front. You could also do a pinwheel on the back, or you could have the front and back just plain like this. And the ribbon is also optional. You could just do them without the ribbon and do a set of 3 and then tie a piece of ribbon on to that, making it a set, which is also really cute. Now what I like to do is every now and then with my lavender bags is I will give them a bit of a scrunch and a squeeze, which kind of releases the lavender smell again. And then once I think it's not smelling so nice anymore, I just pop a few lavender oil drops onto it just to keep it smelling really nice. But I think these make fantastic gift ideas for absolutely anyone, even guys in your life. You could use a nice manly fabric, and I think this would be nice to be hanging in their wardrobes too. And ladies, these are also great to put in with your fabrics to keep them smelling really nice and fresh as well. So I have to do a quick shout out about the fabric that I used. Wasn't it really pretty? And also that ribbon was matching. I don't know if you noticed. It's called Genesis of a Journey, and it's by my friend Janice Hall, who is only 16 years old, for Riley Blake. I'm going to put a link down below if you'd like to check out the full range. It's absolutely incredible, just like her, so I just wanted to do a quick shout out. Well, thank you for watching until the very end. My name's Stacey, and I'll see you in the next video.